All right, let's dive right in here. So, thank you everybody for joining us. This is Sexual Abuse Prevention Among Adolescents. This is a presentation by COSA VFV, and this webinar is also being recorded. We encourage that you share it after you listen to it if you feel that it can help other people as well. So, let's dive right in over here, okay? So COSA is creating safe communities together. We have a no more victims policy. And today's session is sexual abuse prevention among adolescents. And we're going to have a conversation with Scot Gibson, who was our speaker last time. I'm your host, Christian Dye, and I am a COSA volunteer. So Scot has worked extensively with people who have committed these sexual abuse crimes. So, and he has helped us in other webinars in understanding how we can prevent and protect our own children and younger people from these types of crimes. So, Scot, thank you for coming here. Did you want to talk any more about yourself there, Scot?
Yeah, I've been working in the field, working with sexual offenders for over 11 years or so. Um, I have a criminology background. Just want to sort of say that a lot of what we'll be talking about today is not it's not directly related to my employer. The topics are sort of separate from that. So I don't want to say that it's endorsed by them, but the information is all accurate and up to date. And a lot of this is just more my experiences that I'll be talking to more than my employment per se. So
Sure, sure. So, like I said, COSA stands for the Circles of Support and Accountability. COSA VFV for Vancouver Fraser Valley is a nonprofit organization, and it is unique and innovative community justice initiative that provides public education, programming on how to create safe communities for all. COSA VFV also provides post-release support and accountability of offenders in nearby communities in order to support the prevention of these sexual crimes over here. So at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit more about how you can get involved with COSA and in some of the great work that they're doing.
yes.
So a couple of basics over here. So Scot will talk in the first part, and then we will answer questions in the second part. So if you do have a question, maybe refrain from asking it or putting it in the chat until the end. And at the very, very end, we'll have a little feedback survey for you to fill out for us. Okay, and our quick disclaimer, this webinar is provided for general information purposes only and does not constitute legal or professional advice. The views and opinions expressed as part of this webinar do not necessarily state or reflect those of COSA. No user should act on the basis of any material contained in the webinar without obtaining proper legal or other professional advice specific to this situation. And if you want to learn more about COSA, here is their website, cosa.vfvcosa.org. All right, so here, I wanted to start with a couple of statistics over here so we can get a little bit of a context why this information is so incredibly important. More than 11 million Canadians have been physically or sexually assaulted since the age of 15 and older. 1 in 5 women in the US have experienced a rape or an attempted sexual assault. 43.9% of women have experienced some form of sexual violence. So now what we want to do is how we can improve these numbers to make them, to basically try to eliminate them. We want to start with the talking about our adolescence, and that's usually where that's where it usually starts and where it first occurs. So here, Scot, where it starts, if we can get it at the beginning, then we could prevent it from ever happening. So let's talk about violence in the home.
Yeah, so statistics are showing that violence in the home or neglect or abuse tends to show a higher rate of victimization, sexual violence, and violence in general, as well as perpetrating. So it might not necessarily be that they're victims of the offenses, they might actually be the perpetrators as well. So we're seeing a big increase, or increase in statistics when you have that violence in the home. So definitely, like most criminal behavior, if you have a healthy environment, safe environment to go to, you tend not to turn outwards and outside for influences and a place of comfort. So you're seeing less of that behavior if the home environment is a healthy one. So yeah, so violence in the home and violence in general, statistics are showing that if you're been a victim of violence in general, your risk of being sexually assaulted is higher than somebody who hasn't. So that's pretty telling in our statistics.
Yeah, and then for the person who doesn't experience violence in the home, except they end up being, susceptible to being preyed upon or something of that sort.
Yeah.
You and I were talking about this, and you were saying it often starts with bullying in the middle school years. So that would kind of be grades 6 to 8 around
Mhm.
there. Can you
I think
expand on that a little bit?
I think what you're seeing there is your community is starting to change in your adolescent years. You have all your childhood friends, everybody gets along together well, and then you start to see those separations. I think in the last presentation I did, we talked about how there's a significant increase in victimization for young people that suffer from either physical disabilities, mental disability, mentally cognitive disabilities, that type of stuff. So same thing happens when we see our children go off into that next layer of school where it's not as supervised. We start to see our children kind of branch out, which is a good thing. We want our children to be healthy and make good decisions and be creative or healthy decision makers. At the same time, when we're breaking out into that part of our lives, there's a lot of different influences there. And if you're encountering bullying, you're likely to escape from that. And maybe it's not easy to find a healthy and happy environment to be in, especially at the school. So you're seeing that separation happening among young people. A lot of criminal activity, you'll see that pretty regular amongst offenders where they can't find a group to fit into, and they will end up often hanging out with sort of a rougher crowd, maybe older kids. So when we see that happening, especially with young women, they become typically a target for sexual behavior, unfortunately. So you get that singling out of kids, and that bullying tends to be at the heat of it. So our communities are doing much more to tackle that bullying behavior and bring our communities to have at least going to school be a happy and safe, healthy place to be. We see a lot of programs, just lunch programs and so that everybody gets a healthy meal. We're seeing that in Chilliwack, where they trying to remember the name of the program off the top of my head. Bowls for Hope, I think it's called. So we're trying to create a less of a separation for these people, and then make comfort in the schools place. We all went to school when we were younger. We remember who was getting bullied and what type of behavior that looked like. So um, we need to see a little bit of change we see a big change in that middle school years. In this day and age, there's so much media and there's so much attention. I mean, I notice my child follows Kardashians. I mean, I don't know much about them, but every time I see anything about them, I think, what in the world, or what is the draw to these people? They're crazy, in my opinion. but these are the influences, and it's all sex, and it's all beauty, and you see that happening in our middle schools where that separation's happening amongst the kids.
And I guess the whole idea, because I do have kids of that age as well, all girls, and I guess the whole idea is, my personal girls really have a close attachment to their extracurricular activities, which are very, very healthy, the sports,
Yes,
ballet, things of that sort. But I guess where a kid might get lost in those same years is when they don't have something, and it doesn't matter what your child is like. Those are just awkward years. They're just,
absolutely. Absolutely.
ages, 10 to 13 just could not be or any more awkward. And
Yeah,
to have that sense of belonging, and then to latch onto something very, very negative, maybe to have some older peers,
yeah.
upon you because they too are a little bit on the messed up. It sort of makes it sound like that is a time where we actually must be even closer with our children and even closer to see who they're hanging out with. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, those influences are significant, and I know it in my own children is that, sometimes you kind of feel like you're losing the battle with them. You're not connecting for a period of time, and they're in their teenage years where you used to have this hiking relationship. You go up into the forest doing all these things that you did as a family, and all of a sudden you start to see that change, and it's hard for parents to accept as well. But it's really important that we work hard to at least create a very healthy and comfortable environment for them to always feel safe. And I think that's why you see those statistics I mentioned earlier, where people start to, if there's violence in the home and it's not safe to go home, well, where are they going to end up, right? They're going to have to go to friends' places to find that comfort, or they're going to find it at school. And if you're not fitting in at school, on top of that, it's a real struggle.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Like I guess I'm trying to explore some ideas of if maybe a parent or a grandparent right now is maybe noticing that there's more and more distance happening between them and their child, or them and their grandchild. Behavior is changing. They're hanging out with friends that they don't even know. What would you sort of say could be some first steps over here to start to get in front of this?
that's right. Yeah, creating that a healthy environment for our children, and having those conversations is very important to get that dialogue. I mentioned in the previous presentation I did is just some strategies to have those conversations. Just break the barriers, talk about it, talk about the challenges that they might be facing at school. Try to help your child feel comfortable to have those discussions, right? Um, and when we talk about historically, I think we've always sort of swept this behavior. Well, I guess not nobody wants it to happen to them. They don't want it to happen to their kids, and maybe we don't talk about it enough. But I think it is a conversation we need to have with our boys and girls about sexuality and their comfort in their own skin, and what sex means to them, what a relationship means to them, and really spend time on that, understanding what it means to be dating, what is jealousy, um, really breaking down the emotional connection. Because I mean, you're starting at that age where we've done a lot of emotional development with our young adolescents up to that point, but how much do they really understand those intricate emotions, right? I mean, we all understand anger when we feel it, we all understand when we're sad, but there's also periods of feeling violent. Why do we feel violent? Well, maybe I'm feeling my girlfriend's not paying enough attention to me, and I feel ownership over my girlfriend, and I'm feeling jealous, and I don't want other people talking to her. Well, let's explore those emotions a little bit. Why should a teenager have to learn that on their own and not have a chance to have that discussion with their family or with their friends or in a community, where we kind of get ahead of these things, because that's where you start to see that behavior of sexual violence and harassment happening. Oftentimes it's an overcompensation, right? Of feeling uncomfortable. So
Yeah, and I kind of find that between my wife and I, we really struggle with. We have three daughters, but the eldest seems to be leading the way as to the pulling away.
mm,
Still a great kid. It's just, I think it's just an awkward stage, and she just, last thing
yep,
she wants to talk to us about is sex. But we've already had it started that conversation at a very, very early age in a very kind of, appropriate
Absolutely.
way. But now she's very, very aware. She's 16 years old. She's aware of what's going on. So it's
Yeah.
very, very uncomfortable. But I think what I find works really, really well is there has to be some sort of a commonality the between you where you can, have a quick touching base of that conversation. Maybe the commonality is, Sunday ice cream, going out for Sunday ice cream, or going out for dinner, just the two of you, or a quick little, trip to the mall. Uh,
Yeah.
there has to be some form of a dialogue where you parents and grandparents can't be afraid to broach some of these topics, or maybe just to even broach the topic of the statistic. Hey, did you know this statistic over here? Isn't that scary? This statistic,
Yeah.
1 in 5. But there has to be sort of a segue or a leadway, or even talking about, a lot of things that you've talked about over here, because if you're too shy to start the conversation, that's, I believe, the first mistake. There
Yeah.
has to be some form of a communication, some form of a dialogue. And you'd be surprised how, yes, they'll be uncomfortable. You'll also be uncomfortable, but it's
Yeah.
like anything else. It's like a necessary evil. You're uncomfortable when you go get your COVID shot. You're uncomfortable when you go to the doctor and they tell you to take off your clothes. We're all in states of uncomfortability. This is one of the most important ones to be uncomfortable for, though.
Absolutely. And I mean, you could use all those examples of, of going to the doctor and having to take your clothes off. I mean, there's a segue to have this discussion about inappropriate experiences, right? And does the doctor treat you fairly, and is, what's right and what's wrong, and having those discussions that we should be having from a young age. I think that you miss a bit of the, if you haven't had those conversations with a child at a very young age and developed and continued it, it's going to be harder for sure to broach the topic um, later in life. But at the other side of the coin, though, is our boys, right? I mean, you and I both have daughters, but I think there's got to be. I know in my growing up, there was very little talk about the chances of me ever being a perpetrator, right? And I think that's something, especially for adolescents in middle school and stuff like that. They're exploring. You got to remember, they're looking at the Kardashians as a sex object. They're seeing what a women are supposed to look like based on the media and the movies and the video games they play. I mean, I was playing a video game recently because I have a little bit of a, I don't mind a little bit of game playing every once in a while on the video machines, but in the video game I was playing, you could rent a prostitute. I thought, wow, like this is what's this teaching people, right? I mean, your character could make that choice. It was almost like I won't get into it, but it was almost like you had a choice as the character whether you wanted to participate in that act or not. And I thought, why is that even in a video game? But that's what our children are growing up to. That's what our boys are growing up to see. So where's the respect for women, and how do we create that respect? That girls their bodies are not a machine for success. Their bodies are sacred, right? And we have to develop a healthy dating, healthy relationship building in our children, especially for our males, I think.
That's a great point over here. I think a lot of people maybe have come to this talk over here thinking about how can I protect my granddaughter? How can I protect my daughter? But maybe a one part is maybe we also need to be talking and having that conversation with the boys and
Absolutely.
saying, when you're in the locker room with the basketball team and there's all that talk flying around over here, do you understand that what's right and what's wrong? Do you understand even what's wrong in the form of incorrect? You
Yeah.
know, and the ideas. I really glad that you brought that up over here because you've got girls and I've got girls over here. But how many people are having? Are we just having a conversation with our daughters, but no one's talking with our sons?
Mhm.
About the inappropriate and seeing the other flip side of it as well. And of course, all the dangers and the harms that
Yeah.
can come from that. And I remember, the old days of you try to fit in and suddenly this more popular group suddenly lets you in.
Yeah.
And once you're in, you're joining the whatever music they like, you're gonna like. Whatever sport
Yeah.
they like, you're gonna like. And then
So
whatever trash,
impressionable.
yeah, and then whatever trash talk they happen to be doing, whether it be bullying another boy or teasing a girl or objectifying someone else, if you stay quiet, they might be picking on you. Why are you so
Yeah.
quiet? And what those are great conversations. Again, those middle school years are brutal years for everyone.
Yeah.
Really, really
Well,
challenging years.
and I think when we get into education and prevention, I mean, that's where our schools and our sports teams, our churches, our individual communities can really increase how we deal with these things. I don't know if I mentioned it already. I may have mentioned it to you earlier, Christian, but um, one of the staggering statistics shows is that sex offenses are actually increasing annually um, in our society in the Western countries, and it's even worse for other countries that are less successful, I guess, for lack of a better term. Um, but we're seeing an increase where we're seeing a big decrease in a lot of other violent offenses. We're seeing a big increase constantly in sex offending. Part of that is because people are more comfortable coming forward than they have ever been in society because of the Me Too movement and COSA and things like this webinar, for example, trying to encourage people to come forward and address these situations. But when it comes to prevention and education, developing a healthy role models within your change room. So if you have a hockey team and you have two really good hockey players and one of them's a chauvinistic pig, well, don't give him the captaincy. Give it to the guy who's a little quieter and presents as a good captain, but has some good values and beliefs that he can stand up for his teammates and maybe put an end to some of that bullying and that bull crap that goes on in the change room. These are the things as athletes, as coaches, and champions in our communities that we can pick up on and really pick out the leaders and help develop the leaders to prevent this type of misogynistic and the chauvinistic attitudes from getting a hold, right? Because if you think about it, if you have your top athlete on the team who comes in to the change room and someone's talking derogatory or chauvinistic, he's comfortable to stand up against those other people in the change room. What an impact that would have on that environment in a positive way.
No, that completely makes sense over here. Yeah, I like where this talk is going because it really has brought a lot of things to light that I think a lot of people don't really realize over here, such as the middle school, such as, the conversation with the boys. A couple more stats over here. 6% of sexual abuses are reported, and only 6% of sexual abuse are reported. 1 to 2% of date rapes are reported to the police, which is really, really staggering over there because these things are happening. And just to echo what we talked about last time, and one big thing was that, last time we spoke, we kind of talked about who are the perpetrators, and we think that there's this guy hiding in the bushes wearing a hoodie and a baseball cap, and he's going to jump out when you're coming home from a party, where really, according to the statistic, 98% of these offenses are done by somebody they know.
Absolutely.
That's another reason why it's so important not only to talk to the girls about, if you were to be assaulted in any way in your lifetime, there's a 98% chance the person. You'll be sitting beside them. You'll be alone in a room with them by choice.
And
Having that conversation when they're young and letting them know that when they're young, because they might sort of said, I feel safe, I'm in a safe place. But, you
mhm,
know, um, statistically, if there was an uncomfortability and they think, oh, there's no way it could happen in this environment, well, then
mhm,
we know that they're wrong over there,
yeah,
and the boys as well, their judgments are off when they've had too much to drink or there's a lot of peer pressure around them. And maybe there's a bunch of guys even joking about, how drunk somebody is and how they should be taking advantage, and they of course don't realize that of what it is they're doing because they've also had too much, you know.
That's right. And they're perpetuating that talk, that language, those values, right? If you're not standing up against it. So yeah, and I think it brings it back to, that difficult discussions. I mean, those are examples of really easy ways to break the barriers of those conversations. Those examples, those stories or examples that you just shared, Christian. You're going out to a party, people are drinking. What's that look like? It just opens up the door for such good conversation with your children. If you take the time to think about it, right? You're driving them I think I mentioned this last time, you're driving your child to a party. There's a great opportunity to talk to your child and their friends. If you have boys, like, really talk about respecting women. I don't want to ever find out, son, that you disrespected a woman at this party. I don't agree with that. Like, really setting that sort of language and having what is respectful, what is disrespectful. And getting a little bit further is, are you dating yet? It's just a simple question to ask your child. Are you dating anyone right now? Are you thinking about dating? Are you attracted to anyone? I mean, it can create a lot of good discussion, and get that into a dialogue about what is a healthy relationship, what is a healthy adolescent dating relationship, what does that look like? Is it watching movies? Is it, what does it consist of? What do you think you have to do? What are your friends doing? It creates a great dialogue to have that discussion with your child.
Yeah, absolutely. And here, how to prevent sexual abuse over here. So to summarize a bunch of the things that we've been saying, one is education starting at home,
Yep.
having those conversations with their kids, but understanding when those moments when they're going to be most vulnerable. And the last talk that we gave, and by the way, if you missed the last webinar that we gave on a similar topic over there, Angela will provide you Angela's email at the end. She could send you the recorded link. So if this is the first time you're joining us, but you wanted to hear more, then you really should listen to the first part of our talk. But I remember one of the most powerful things that you said in the first part of our talk, especially when we had very, very young, and this applies to middle school teenagers as well, but very, very young kids. If you talk to them about, if you're ever in a position where someone is touching you inappropriately, you're in a dangerous position. One of the most, and we know that 98% of the time it's someone that they know. Could
Right.
be a boyfriend, it could be a neighbor, it could be an uncle, it could be a hockey coach, it could be a
Yep.
teacher. But one of the most powerful things you could possibly say is, stop, or I'm going to tell my parents.
Yep.
And if you just taught and burn that through, whether they're 5 years old, 10 years old, or 15 years old, or 25 years old, if you say, stop, I'm going to tell the police, stop, I'm going to tell my parents, and right away, that
Yep.
is an amazing deterrent, whether they're the
Yep.
hockey coach, the uncle, the boyfriend. And all
Yep.
of a sudden, there's this accountability that scares the living hell out of them. So I really like this idea of conversations, education.
Yep.
But prevention starts in the home for sure. Give us a little bit more. What are some other things that you might recommend over here to help to warn or prepare?
Well, I think when we talking about, you mentioned the education. At home it happens, and I think I gave an example of it. I think if you're in other roles in society, because we're all adults, I think, that are listening to this tonight, and I hope there's some youth that are they're listening in. Maybe they can share some examples from their life in the question part. But as adults, I'm with search and rescue in the community. I play sports. We need to set an example as well. And if you're a coach of a sports team and you're seeing sort of something happen, or some behavior or dialogue happening, we need to end it. We need to put it to rest, quick and effectively. Because if we allow it, that makes it okay, right? For that misogynistic talk in the change room. I'm thinking that because I'm a male growing up playing hockey. You heard all sorts of stuff when I was growing up, and some of those coaches, they perpetuated it themselves. So and those are your role models. So how good is that if that's happening, right? I know, I heard a story one time from somebody who said, he was telling me that, I forget how it went, but it's along the lines of, my dad said, if you're ever going to cheat on your wife, make sure you do it with somebody who has as much to lose as you do. And I thought, that is the most disgusting thing I've ever heard a father teach their kid. Like, that is your educational point to your son. Like, wow, it's those types of things that are just horrible, and we need to get away from in our society. And I think when we're talking about education, having those, if at the schools, I know are doing a much better job of creating environments to empower women, um, to empower young girls. Um, as teachers, as educators, and coaches, bringing the empowering those groups of people that are more likely to be targeted or at risk, is really important, and making them part of the solution, and getting them to be sort of the champions of standing up against that stuff is really important, in our society.
Yeah, yeah. No, this is great stuff. I'm going to share some other resources here, but I'm actually going to cue the people listening. If they had a question, why don't we throw it in the chat now, and then I'm going to kind of moderate the questions. Okay. So if you did have a question, feel free to put it in the chat, and then we'll moderate it. Okay. And then while we are waiting for those questions over here, here is a prevention starts in the home resource, and some statistics over here. So perhaps maybe you want to take a picture of the screen to get some of the websites over here regarding sexual assault. And what I want to do is I want to share a very impactful document, and we're going to have Angela at the end. If you want a copy of this document, just because I don't think you'll be able to capture the full website that is downloaded off of, but we'll have Angela send it to you at the end if you'd like. What I'm going to do over here is I'm just going to show you a quick copy of this document. So here the document is basically called a technical package to prevent sexual violence. And I think, let me see if I can get it here. All right, there it is. Okay, so it looks like this thing is about 48 pages long. It's a nice little PDF. Angela will have it, and she will email it to anyone who is interested. But if you take a look over here, this was developed by multiple people. All of them seem to have a PhD behind their name, which is always a sign. And then here, if you take a look at some of the subtopics over here, create protective environments, provide opportunities to empower, support girls and women, teach skills to prevent sexual violence, promote social norms that protect against violence. So we've got a lot of really good, it seems like it's a really good sort of handbook as a resource for what a lot of people who want to learn a little bit more about it. So like I said, Angela will have access to sharing this at the very end if you email her. So here, let's keep moving. All right, so again, if there are any questions, feel free to put it in the chat, and then we're happy to moderate for you. So Scott, while we're waiting for questions over here, I have, of course, a couple questions. Being
Okay.
a person of 3 daughters, a couple of my questions over here is, what do you sort of find is the age that we really should start the conversation? Not so much about, the good touching and bad touching, or say no to strangers, but I think really the conversation a little bit deeper into really getting to that sort of sexual prevention. It could start with the bullying, things that are on TV are misrepresenting. so my philosophy is get them when they're really, really young, but too
Yep,
young and they don't understand half of what you're saying.
that's right.
You wait a little too long and they're embarrassed like crazy and they don't even want to talk about it. And so I thought maybe an appropriate age and maybe some appropriate strategies. Like the last thing my daughter wants to do is sit down for an hour with me to talk about this stuff. So
Yeah.
what have you seen or what do you think is successful?
Well, I think starting off young again, it's stages. It happens in stages. You start off with the inappropriate touching and really ask a lot of questions of who's allowed to bathe you. And we talked about that last time. And what would be appropriate, what's not appropriate very early on. And then you sort of go as they age into I know I have a 9-year-old daughter right now, and I'm noticing a lot of talk. Let them kind of gear you to like anything with parenting. Let them be the gauge of when it's appropriate to have that discussion. Because at 9, my daughter's starting to say, "Well, I had a crush on this guy," and I thought, okay, well, the fact that she's comfortable talking to me, I'm doing something right. So then we start asking questions, but try not to make it fun and playful and tease her about having a boyfriend or thinking she wants to have a boyfriend or whatever. Just be more inquisitive and ask questions and draw the discussion of where you want it to go. And what does it mean for a 9-year-old to be in a relationship? Like if you wanted to date this boy, what does that mean? And have that discussion, and then you can kind of draw out some teaching points in there, I think. um, I mean, one thing I found is my 9-year-old isn't dating by any means. She just has a few crushes, but it draws that out, right? And oftentimes we've had the discussion that she's just saying, well, I just think he's really cute, and we discussed that in some detail, and it's quite lovely actually to watch her little brain work around what these relationships mean, and discussing what a healthy relationship looks like. And that's just friendship at that point, right? And as they grow up, I have an 18-year-old, so they got a little bit of experience with that. By grade 8, grade 9, they start to get that attraction, and you start to get into that real situation where they actually might start dating somebody. A little bit scary for parents, and then probably a lot more scary for our children. So being aware of that risk that they're taking, it's a step in their first time. Let's hopefully their first relationship's a positive and healthy one, um, and really educating our children about sex, having those discussions at that stage, at that age group we're talking about, middle school, getting that discussion out there. What does that look like? Because I mean, it's one thing to say that you shouldn't have sex until you're married, but I mean, we can't guarantee. We'd rather prepare them with the education and the knowledge beforehand to make those healthy decisions. And let's face it, we all want to enjoy our sexual experiences, and we want that for our children as well. And hopefully, as they grow up, they make those healthy decisions with our guidance. So I think that's where it starts. I think early adolescence, really developing and understanding what their body's about, and that they're in control of their own body and no one else can, having those discussions, and really spending time on what dating means and what relationships mean and what jealousy looks like and different emotions that relate to relationships, and empowering them to be able to make the decisions to end a relationship. I'm dating this boy, and he's popular. That's what I like about him. Well, that should be a really good discussion that you're having with us. A pretty superficial way to start a relationship. So having those discussions, I think, will really empower our children. And I think that's when I would start, or that's when I have started those conversations. And
Yeah.
then obviously all the rules at home, right? In your home, I try to encourage my daughter to bring her friends home and make a comfortable environment for her, so I can kind of observe and look at what's going on with her friend groups. Um, and having discussions about peer pressure, and more so just that, those discussions of what what are your friends like? What are they wanting to achieve in life? What are you wanting to achieve in life? And do they match up, right? Like if you want to be a doctor and you're working really hard and you got A pluses and all your friends have got D's and they're basically flunking out, well, take a look at that. Reflect on it, honey, what do they bring to your relationship and having those discussions. So um, you know, we are kind of who we hang around with, aren't we?
Definitely. I was gonna say that. I think keeping close tabs of who they're hanging out with, and I think uh, my wife and I are pretty strong in our policy that we don't want them to hang out with someone who we haven't met.
Yeah.
Uh, we don't mind they hang out with them, but the rule is we want to meet them, want to get to
Mhm.
know them, and we do have a certain level of control of how often they go out, where they go, who's there, so we can control that. But I think if there's a wedge that starts to form between them, and if it's going to form, it'll be those middle school years,
Yeah.
because now they can kind of go
Yeah.
to other people's houses. They can, they're not with you as much.
Yeah.
I big thing I'm getting out of this talk is really that core middle school years, and two of my kids are in it right now. One of the areas that I sort of found is it sometimes happens naturally, but we close the door to it if there's something that they see or hear. I actually
Yeah.
think it could be an opportunity, and I'll give you an example. We There's a one of these real estate shows that we like to watch. One of the realtors was selling Rose McGowan's house, one of these $1 million listing type of houses. And it's just, my daughter likes it because she, likes to see the fancy houses and everything. And she sees those, all the different things. But then when Rose McGowan needed to sell her home because to pay for her lawyer bills, then I decided to start the conversation to say, oh, this is an actress, but she has to sell, which is why she's selling at such a loss on her home.
Mhm.
And then I knew my daughter was going to ask, why does she have to sell? I said, to pay for her legal bills. That's Rose McGowan. She started the Me Too movement. Do you
Yeah.
know what that is? And then right away she says, no, what is that? And I didn't go too deep, but I did pause the show, gave her a quick, brief explanation of what it
Yeah.
meant and what was happening. And then I just started the show again.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
and
she's gonna look that name up, and she's got all
yeah,
the access and tools to
and,
her. So
and it was just a great segue to there was
mhm.
this man who, was a big
Yeah.
time employer, I guess is sort of
Yeah.
what you would understand it as. And in order for her to advance her career, this guy was trying to, this guy was doing the wrong thing sexually for her. And she understood that part of it. But I
Yeah.
get the idea that, oh, it doesn't just happen to kids, it happens to adults, it could happen at any stage, and it's so serious. And it says, yeah, and when she started this movement, all these other women, so none of the women knew that there was all these other women,
Yeah.
and that's how prevalent it is. And so I think that something like, especially maybe there's a word they don't fully understand, and then
Yeah.
you can explore it. Or if
Sure.
there's a
Yeah.
situation, you could just dive into it. So a lot of people say, I know some people would see or hear something on TV and they want to switch the channel as fast as possible because
Yeah.
they don't want their kid asking about it. I go the opposite direction. Let's talk about
Yeah.
it. It's right there. They've
Yeah.
just given me the segue.
Like, and
In a
explore.
conversation.
It's a great opportunity to explore a child's decision making and thinking processes, right? To know where they're at, be curious and ask questions and let them guide this. It'll allow you to have a lot more knowledge of where they're at, and what they need to improve on. Because what's the word I'm thinking of? I want to say creative thinking, but it's not the word I'm looking for. Anyway, dynamic sort of thinking processes that we have to have and develop and build on.
Yeah.
Um, we can a child can get lost and stifle that growth if they don't have the appropriate friends and relationships. We were talking about that earlier, where the adolescent and breaking off into the wrong groups. They're not expanding their thinking processes. They're stifling them. They're stunting them, if they're hanging out with the wrong groups and doing drugs and other things. So it's actually having the negative impact on that development significantly. And then if they become victims of sex offenses or other violence, well, now they're going to start having more issues and more problems
Yeah, that's
developing.
where the cycle. Actually, one of the questions that just came through is, I'm not sure if you know this off the top of your head, but what percentage of males experience some form of abuse by the time they're age 18?
Males, yeah, it's I think it was I'm trying to remember what the stat was last time we did that. I might have it right here, one moment. I think
Sure.
it's I mean, it's under reported because it's more embarrassing for men to report sexual offenses.
Yeah.
So it's far more underreported than the female
And that's
counterparts
what I
here.
mean. While you're looking it up, it's even more reason to talk to the not only the females but the males, to
That's
talk
right.
to the same, because they're victims to the exact same predatory behavior. And the thing is, what COSA is trying to do is to break the circle, because what I found volunteering with COSA, many of these offenders were offended against when they were at a vulnerable age, usually as a child or as in their teen years as well. And then of course they repeated the cycle, which is what COSA aims to do, and try to break that cycle
That's
through
right.
their volunteers, through their counseling, through their accountability and support for these predators.
I'll give you an example on the cycle in a minute on an actual experience that I've worked with somebody, but approximately 1 in 15 men in the United States, 6.7% have been made to penetrate someone at some point during their lives. 5.8% have experienced sexual coercion, and 10.8% have experienced unwanted sexual contact, and 13.3 have experienced non-contact unwanted sexual experiences. So that's men, that statistic, and that's in the United States. As with most forms of violence, racial and ethnic and sexual minority groups are disproportionately more impacted, as we've seen across the board with these stats. So again, that's underreported, significantly underreported. So 1 in 15 men would experience something like that. But keep in mind again that what was it? I can't remember what the stat was we had earlier, but it's a much lower percentage of
Oh
people
yeah,
coming forward.
yeah. A couple of other statistics as well, talking about vulnerable years. We've talked about where it could start in the middle school with the bullying,
Yep,
but one other fact is that, when kids are in high school, they really are at still a very, very sheltered environment with their parents. Lots of monitoring, lots of control by the parents. But then when kids get to university or college, sometimes they move away, or even if they don't move away, there's an enormous greater amount of independence. And this statistic over here says that adolescents seem to be at a period of high risk in their college years, particularly vulnerable women. And it says here that campus sexual assault, 20% of undergraduate women indicated that they had been a victim of a sexual violence since the beginning of college. So
4 years,
that's 1 in 5.
and that's
That's
only 4 year period, right?
1 in 5 in a 4-year period over here,
Yeah, that's
So
significant.
it's very, very significant. So having, again, where the areas where are vulnerable, well, one is when, like you said, in the middle school years where they're exploring, their friends are doing different things. And of course, that really, really starting to date and unable to really filter their emotions. Maybe some people experiencing bad home lives and now they're projecting it onto their relationships. And then this other area where suddenly we've sheltered our kids in high school, but now we've let them off into college, university, but we haven't prepared them. We think,
That's
oh,
right.
19, 20 years old, straight A student, already drives a car. Why do I need to teach them anything? Where no, they're going to be even more vulnerable as well
Yeah.
because we've nurtured them. We've nurtured and sheltered them. And now they're in an environment where, oh, it's really uncomfortable to talk about a 19-year-old about, uh, about date rape or some sort of a inappropriate sexual touching. They think, oh well, they know it by this time, but it's not true, right? The statistic, 1 in 5, right?
1 in 5, yep. And that means and we know that that's underreported. So then
Yeah,
we also know, that our sons out there could be the perpetrators. So again, building up that knowledge and that knowledge base and developing those communities within the friend circles to really stand up and I mean, the Me Too movement's been a great thing for bringing a lot of this to light, and we need to really get our our guys and our boys and our daughters together to really stand up and fight this and lower these statistics and stand up for
Absolutely.
each other, right?
That's a great segue to slowly start to wrap up over here, and how, what are some other things that we could do? Well, COSA VFV is one way. COSA Vancouver Fraser Valley.ca, dedicate to providing services and resources for preventative responses to sexual and social violence over here. So we are continuing our webinar series now. Once again, if this is your first time listening, we've actually had multiple events here. And Angela, and this is her email, AOVETERS@gmail.com. She can provide links to our other talks, which are all incredibly valuable. Recorded link over here, of course, should be forwarded to friends, family members, grandparents, parents, anyone that you think, of course, that can benefit from this. Our next webinar is to be determined, but just by registering for this webinar over here, we will send an invite to the next one when it is determined, probably some point in the summer. Now, if you're listening to this recording because someone has forwarded it on to you, then I would suggest that you email Angela just to say, oh, if you can keep me in the loop next time that you have a session, I'm very, very interested. Now, again, if you're also interested in the package that I showed you, the online package about helping to prevent sexual offense, Angela will have a copy of it. If you email her, she can fire you a quick copy. And again, we recommend that you send this to other people and that you share it with as many people as possible. So how can you get more involved? Well, here's one way: let others know. So one way is by looking a little bit more at some of the resources on the COSA website, and accountability education. So on COSA website, you could register for a webinar. You could volunteer, which is great. We always need more volunteers at COSA, and there's multiple ways that you could volunteer. So what you want to do is you want to click on the link to get a better idea how, or you could donate. And COSA really is a fantastic organization. Always needs financial support. Think about them. Some people will have a monthly donation to certain different charities. This should be one of the ones that you make room for, or you could give a lump sum donation as well. So once again, it's www.COSAVancouverFraserValley.ca. If you really are enjoying these webinars and these workshops and you think that they're adding a lot of great value, by all means, take that second step and either become a volunteer or add us to your donation list over here. So I want to thank you, Scott, for coming once again. Hopefully we'll have you back again. And for everybody that has attended, thank you very much. And we hope to see you at the next one. So Scott, until next time, let's stay safe, let's stay vaccinated, and hopefully
let's start mingling in person again, eh?
Yeah. It would be great to have a room full of people and to do some interaction here. But thanks everybody for joining, and we will see you guys next time.
Thank you.
All right now.